Chosen one, listen carefully. There is a reason the subject of delay has become so heavy on your heart. There is a reason you have looked at other people's lives and quietly wondered, when will it finally be my turn? You have watched doors open for people who seemed less prepared than you. You have watched opportunities arrive for people who prayed less, waited less, struggled less, and somehow moved ahead while you remained standing in the same place. You smiled for them. You celebrated them. You encouraged them. But there were nights when you turned away from everyone and asked God a question you were almost afraid to say out loud. How much longer? How much longer will I wait for the answer? How much longer will I carry this uncertainty? How much longer will I keep believing when nothing around me seems to change? But hear this carefully, your delay is not proof that your destiny has been denied. There are moments when heaven allows something to remain still, because what is coming requires a version of you that has not yet emerged. You thought the silence meant nothing was happening. You thought the closed door meant you had been forgotten. You thought the repeated disappointment meant your prayers were passing through an empty sky. But what if the silence was doing something to you? What if the waiting was separating you from the person you used to be? What if the season that made you cry was also the season that taught you discernment? What if the doors that refused to open were protecting you from entering places that would have cost you your peace? You have been measuring your life by what has not happened, while God has been measuring you by what has changed inside you. There is a difference, and tomorrow is not merely another day on the calendar. Tomorrow represents a line you are approaching, a point where you must stop carrying yesterday's mentality into tomorrow's opportunity. The greatest danger is not that your breakthrough will arrive late. The greatest danger is that it could arrive while you are still thinking like the person who survived the delay. You have spent so long asking when the season will end that you may not have realized something. You are being prepared to live differently when it does. The waiting has taught you how to recognize what you once begged for, but no longer need at any price. It has taught you that access is not always favor, that attention is not always love, and that movement is not always progress. Sometimes God will allow you to sit still long enough to discover whether you truly want the destination or merely want to escape the place where you are. And that question should shake you, because tomorrow something must change, not necessarily around you first, but within you. You cannot walk into a new chapter while constantly negotiating with the old one. You cannot receive something new while worshipping what already expired. There is a version of you that was built to survive the waiting, but another version is being formed to steward what comes after it. And that is where this message becomes personal. Before we go deeper, I want you to understand why you should stay until the very end of this message. There is a deeper layer to your delay that most people never recognize, and it concerns what you are going to do when the thing you have been waiting for finally appears. Because sometimes the miracle is not the door opening. Sometimes the miracle is becoming wise enough to know which door deserves your entrance. Stay with this message, because we are going to uncover what you need to release before tomorrow, what mindset can sabotage an answered prayer, and why the final stage of waiting can feel strangely uncomfortable just before movement begins. And if this message speaks directly to the place you have been standing in, support this channel by sewing through the support link pinned in the comment section. Your support helps this message continue reaching people who may be sitting alone tonight, wondering whether God has forgotten them. So, because you believe that words of faith, encouragement, and truth should continue reaching people who need them, let your support become part of the work of carrying hope into someone else's difficult season. And right now, don't type a long sentence. Type this simple prophetic declaration in the comments. My waiting season is breaking. Let those words become a reminder of the decision you are making in this moment. Not a promise that every circumstance must magically change tomorrow, but a declaration that you will no longer allow delay to define your identity, your confidence, or your expectation. There is power in recognizing that a season has taught you what it needed to teach you. There is power in saying, I refuse to remain emotionally trapped in a chapter that God is teaching me to leave. And chosen one, you need to hear this next part, because it may challenge you. You cannot prepare for a new season while constantly mourning the old one. You cannot keep asking for new territory while secretly wishing for the comfort of what God already told you to outgrow. Some of the things you are calling delays are actually invitations to detach. Some of the things you call unanswered prayers may be exposing desires that were never meant to control you. And some of the people you desperately wanted beside you may have been removed because they were connected to a version of yourself that could not survive where you are going. Tomorrow is approaching, but your preparation cannot begin tomorrow. It begins with the decisions you make today, the way you think today, the boundaries you establish today, the things you finally stop chasing today, the resentment you finally release today, the fear you finally confront today. Because when movement comes, you will not have time to become ready. You must become ready before the movement arrives. Noah built before the rain. Joseph developed wisdom before the palace. David learned responsibility before the throne. Esther was positioned before the moment requiring courage appeared. Scripture repeatedly shows us that preparation often happens in obscurity, long before the visible moment arrives. So perhaps your hidden season was not wasted after all. Perhaps it was rehearsal. Chosen one. There is another reason your delay had to last longer than you wanted. You were learning the difference between urgency and divine timing. When you desperately want something, every closed door feels personal. Every unanswered email feels like rejection. Every month without progress feels like evidence that you are falling behind. You start comparing your timeline with everybody else's timeline. You see someone younger accomplishing what you have prayed about for years, and something inside you begins whispering, maybe it is too late for you. That whisper has destroyed more dreams than failure ever could. Because failure can teach you. Delay can mature you. But comparison can make you abandon yourself. You begin making desperate decisions simply because you are tired of waiting. You accept what you would have rejected if you were peaceful. You rush into relationships because you hate being alone. You take opportunities that violate your values because you are afraid another one will never come. You announce plans before they are mature because you want people to know something is finally happening. You compromise your standards because you confuse movement with advancement. And then you wonder why the thing you prayed for does not feel like the answer when it arrives. This is why preparation matters. Tomorrow requires discernment, not desperation. The next chapter cannot be built on the emotional hunger of the previous one. You have to become comfortable enough within yourself that you no longer grab whatever appears simply because you have been waiting. Think about that. What if your greatest test tomorrow is not whether something finally comes, but whether you can recognize whether it is actually good for you? What if the door you have been praying about opens, but behind it is something you once wanted and no longer need? Will you still enter simply because you spent years asking for access? Or will you have enough wisdom to say, I wanted this before I understood myself. I know better now. That is maturity. That is growth. That is what the waiting can produce when you refuse to let it make you bitter. You are not supposed to emerge from delay desperate for anything that resembles progress. You are supposed to emerge clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you will tolerate. Clear about what you are called to build. Clear about what deserves your energy. Clear about what no longer has permission to occupy your heart. And this is why tomorrow matters. Not because we can control the future or guarantee a particular event, but because every new day gives you an opportunity to stop interpreting your life through the lens of yesterday. Your season can change when your response changes. Your direction can change when your obedience changes. Your environment can change when your standards change. Your future can begin looking different when you stop making permanent decisions from temporary pain. You have cried enough over what did not happen. You have questioned yourself enough. You have spent enough nights replaying conversations, missed opportunities, betrayals, disappointments, and doors that never opened. There comes a moment when you must look at the evidence of everything you survived and say, perhaps I am not waiting for my life to begin. Perhaps I have been becoming the person who can finally carry it. That realization changes everything. Because delay loses some of its power when you discover that it was not empty time. It was formation. It was refinement. It was exposure. It was instruction. It showed you who stayed when you had nothing to offer. It showed you who disappeared when you stopped being useful. It showed you what you were willing to tolerate when you were afraid. It showed you what you truly valued when everything familiar was stripped away. And now, as tomorrow approaches, you are standing at the edge of something deeper than an external breakthrough. You are standing at the edge of a decision. Will you continue identifying yourself as the person who is waiting, or will you begin walking as the person who has been prepared? Because sometimes the end of delay does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it begins quietly, with one decision, one boundary, one act of courage, one surrendered expectation, one step you were previously too afraid to take. And when you take that step, you may discover that the road was not waiting for you to become perfect. It was waiting for you to become willing. And this is where you need to become very honest with yourself, chosen one. Because the end of a delayed season is not always comfortable. Sometimes the moment you have been begging for requires you to release the very habits that helped you survive the years before it. You learned how to expect disappointment, so you stopped getting excited. You learned how to protect your heart, so you stopped allowing yourself to hope. You learned how to do everything alone, so now receiving help feels almost threatening. You learned to keep your plans private, because every time you shared them, someone questioned them, mocked them, or watched them fail. You learned to expect people to leave, so you started leaving emotionally before they could hurt you. You learned to live with little, and eventually you convinced yourself that wanting more was dangerous. But there is a hidden cost to surviving for too long. Survival can become an identity. You can become so accustomed to disappointment that peace feels suspicious. You can become so familiar with struggle that ease makes you uncomfortable. You can become so used to closed doors that an open one makes you wonder what is wrong with it. And that is why this next stage requires more than excitement. It requires inner reconstruction. You cannot carry the psychology of deprivation into an environment of abundance and expect everything to remain stable. If you spent years believing that you must fight for every crumb, you may sabotage the table when it is finally prepared for you. If you spent years believing that nobody would choose you, you may question the person who genuinely does. If you spent years believing that opportunities always disappear, you may hesitate when one finally requires courage. This is the strange battle nobody talks about. Sometimes the final battle before advancement is not fighting an enemy outside you. It is convincing the part of you that has been wounded that it is finally safe to move forward. Tomorrow, you need to stop asking only, "What is coming toward me?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming as it approaches?" Because a new season cannot be sustained by an old mindset. You need fresh discipline, fresh boundaries, fresh expectations, fresh courage. You need to stop treating every inconvenience as a prophecy of another disaster. You need to stop interpreting every quiet moment as abandonment. You need to stop assuming that because something took longer than expected, it must never happen. There are things that require timing, because the right outcome depends on the right conditions. A seed underground can look dead to anyone who does not understand seasons. Nothing seems to be happening above the soil, yet beneath the surface, roots are forming. The darkness is not necessarily destruction. Sometimes it is where preparation happens without applause. And perhaps that describes more of your life than you realize. While you are asking why nobody could see you, roots were forming. While you were wondering why opportunities were passing you by, your judgment was developing. While you were grieving what you lost, your attachment to the wrong things was being broken. While you thought you were standing still, your internal foundation was becoming stronger. You may have wanted immediate evidence, but sometimes evidence arrives only after transformation. The root comes before the fruit. The foundation comes before the building. The character comes before the influence. And the capacity comes before the increase. So don't curse the hidden work simply because it did not look impressive. There is something else you must leave behind before this delay truly loses its authority over your mind. The need for everyone to understand your journey. You have spent too much emotional energy explaining yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You tried to explain why you walked away. You explained why you became quieter. You explained why you changed your priorities. You explained why you could no longer participate in certain conversations, friendships, environments, or habits. But hear this. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your transformation. Some people only recognize the version of you that benefited them. When you stop being available for manipulation, they call you difficult. When you stop accepting disrespect, they call you proud. When you become disciplined, they say you have changed. When you become selective, they say you think you are better than them. Let them talk. You are not required to shrink yourself so another person can remain comfortable with your growth. The person you are becoming will disappoint people who depended on the person you used to be. That does not automatically make you wrong. Sometimes growth creates distance because the old connection was built around an old identity. And this is one of the hardest truths about entering a new chapter, minors. You may have to stop knocking on doors that have already taught you they will not open. Not because you are worthless, not because you failed, but because your direction has changed. There are places where you spent years trying to prove that you belonged, when your real assignment was to discover that you did not need their approval. There are people you begged to see your value, while heaven was trying to teach you to see it yourself. There are rooms where you were constantly shrinking because you were terrified of being rejected, but the next room may require you to stand upright. You cannot carry an apology for your existence into a season that requires confidence. You cannot keep asking permission to become who you were created to be. And perhaps this is why the final stretch has felt different. You may have noticed that certain conversations no longer satisfy you. Certain environments suddenly feel exhausting. Certain habits that once entertained you now leave you empty. Certain relationships feel increasingly difficult to maintain. Do not automatically assume something is wrong with you. Sometimes your appetite changes because your season is changing. You are beginning to crave substance instead of noise, meaning instead of attention, peace instead of validation, purpose instead of popularity. And when your internal appetite changes, your external choices begin changing too. This is where tomorrow becomes significant. Wait, not because a clock possesses supernatural power, but because you are approaching a moment of personal agreement with the future you say you want. You cannot say you want peace and continue feeding chaos. You cannot say you want purpose and spend every day distracted. You cannot say you want a different life while defending the routines that created your current one. Something has to be surrendered. Something has to be reorganized. Something has to be confronted. And perhaps that thing is not your circumstance. Perhaps it is your attachment to the circumstance. Maybe you keep asking God to remove the wilderness while refusing to learn what the wilderness came to teach you. Maybe you keep asking for a door while holding tightly to the key of the old one. Maybe you keep asking for elevation while secretly fearing the responsibility that comes with being seen. Think about that. What if the thing you call delay is exposing the fear you will need to overcome before you can sustain the answer? That question can change the way you see everything, because the truth is, chosen one, tomorrow does not need you to predict every detail. It needs you to be ready to respond when life presents you with an unfamiliar opportunity. You have been asking for a breakthrough, but breakthroughs often create responsibility. You have been asking for influence, but influence requires character. You have been asking for financial increase, but increase demands wisdom. You have been asking for love, but healthy love requires vulnerability. You have been asking for restoration, but restoration may require you to stop revisiting what destroyed you. You have been asking for a new beginning, but new beginnings demand that you stop worshipping the memory of what ended. You cannot receive tomorrow with both hands if one hand is still holding yesterday. Let that settle into your heart. There is a reason some doors close permanently. There is a reason certain seasons cannot be recreated. There is a reason some people become memories instead of companions. Not every ending needs to be reversed. Not every loss needs to be recovered. Not every unanswered question deserves another investigation. Sometimes closure is simply the courage to stop demanding an explanation from something that already gave you its answer. You have spent enough time asking why they left, why they betrayed you, why they rejected you, why the opportunity disappeared, why the timing failed, why the prayer seemed unanswered, and maybe you will never receive every explanation. But you can still move forward. You do not need every answer to obey the next instruction. Scripture reminds us in Proverbs 3:5, the verse 6, to trust in the Lord rather than leaning entirely on our own understanding. And that principle becomes especially powerful when your circumstances make no sense. Trust does not mean pretending everything is easy. It means refusing to make confusion your permanent home. It means continuing to walk when you cannot see the entire road. It means believing that uncertainty does not automatically mean danger. And tomorrow, you may have to make a choice that your old self would have avoided. You may have to say yes where fear tells you to hide. You may have to say no where desperation tells you to accept. You may have to walk away without applause. You may have to begin before you feel completely prepared. You may have to forgive without receiving an apology. You may have to stop waiting for someone else to validate the assignment you already know is yours. This is the maturity your delay has been producing. Not passive waiting, active preparation. There is a difference between sitting around hoping life changes and becoming so prepared that, when movement comes, you can recognize it. The season of delay taught you patience. Now the next season will test your courage. The waiting taught you endurance. Now the next chapter will test your stewardship. The loneliness taught you self-knowledge. Now connection will test your boundaries. The rejection taught you resilience. Now opportunity will test your humility. Every season carries a lesson, and if you refuse to learn it, you keep meeting the same lesson in different clothing. But if you learn it, something changes. You stop repeating cycles. You stop chasing unavailable people. You stop forcing locked doors. You stop confusing chemistry with covenant, attention with affection, speed with progress, and possession with purpose. You begin walking differently. And suddenly, what once looked like a delay begins looking like divine preparation. You realize the years were not merely taking something from you. They were giving you something you could not have received any other way. Discernment, patience, wisdom, depth, strength. And now you are approaching the moment when those invisible qualities become visible through your choices. So when tomorrow comes, do not wake up looking for a miracle while ignoring the transformation already taking place inside you. Wake up with your eyes open. Pay attention. Listen carefully. Move wisely, because the end of delay may not announce itself with fireworks. It may arrive as a conversation, an idea, an invitation, a decision, a door, a sudden realization, a burden lifted from your heart, a courage you did not have yesterday. And when that moment comes, do not run backward simply because forward feels unfamiliar. You have already survived the season that taught you how to wait. Now you must become the person who knows how to walk. Chosen one, now we arrive at the part you cannot afford to overlook. The end of delay is not permission to become careless. It is a call to become awake. You have spent so much time asking God to change your circumstances that you may have forgotten to ask Him to change the way you respond to them. Tomorrow, when you wake up, do not immediately search for evidence that everything has changed. First, look within. Ask yourself what you are no longer willing to carry. Ask yourself what fear has been controlling your decisions. Ask yourself which habit has been quietly consuming the energy you need for your future. Ask yourself whether you are still trying to impress people who have already made up their minds about you. Ask yourself whether you are still grieving something that God may be asking you to release. These questions are uncomfortable because they remove the temptation to blame everything outside yourself. Sometimes the door is not the problem. Sometimes the hesitation is. Sometimes the opportunity is not missing. Sometimes your confidence has been buried underneath years of disappointment. Sometimes the blessing is closer than you think, but your attention is still fixed on the place where you were wounded. You keep looking backward, waiting for an explanation, while life is quietly moving forward. You cannot hear a new instruction while constantly replaying an old conversation. There comes a moment when you have to stop demanding that yesterday makes sense before you allow tomorrow to matter. You may never understand why certain people betrayed you. You may never know why some opportunities disappeared. You may never receive an apology from the person who damaged your confidence. You may never understand why something you prayed for with your whole heart took so long. But unanswered questions do not have to become permanent chains. There is a freedom that comes when you finally say, I may not understand everything, but I refuse to let what happened to me determine what happens next. That is the mentality you need, because tomorrow is not asking you to erase your past. It is asking you to stop allowing your past to write your future. Remember what Isaiah 43:19 says about God doing a new thing and making a way where there seems to be none. The beauty of that promise is that a new thing requires new vision. You cannot recognize a new road if you keep staring at the old one. You cannot identify a new opportunity if you are measuring everything against the disappointment that came before it. You cannot recognize healthy love if chaos has become your definition of passion. You cannot recognize genuine favor if you believe you must suffer to deserve every good thing. Your perception has to change. The season ahead may look unfamiliar precisely because you have never been there before. Do not reject it simply because it does not resemble what you know. The wilderness was familiar by the time you left it. The next chapter will not be. That is why courage matters. Faith is not knowing every detail. Faith is moving forward without demanding a complete map. And maybe tomorrow, your first breakthrough will simply be this. You will stop being afraid of your own future. There is also something you need to understand about divine timing. Sometimes the delay ends before you realize it has ended. You may be waiting for a dramatic announcement, a sudden miracle, a perfect sign, or an unmistakable moment when heaven declares, now. But life rarely works that neatly. Sometimes the transition happens quietly. One morning, You realize you no longer miss what once consumed you. One afternoon, you receive a message you would have prayed for months ago, but now you are calm enough to respond wisely. One conversation introduces an opportunity you never could have planned. One decision changes the direction of an entire year. One act of obedience places you in an environment you were not expecting. One boundary protects you from repeating a cycle. One idea becomes the beginning of something that eventually changes your life. The door may open without making noise. This is why you must pay attention. Your breakthrough may not arrive wearing the clothes you expected. It may not look like the exact picture you created in your imagination. It may come disguised as responsibility. It may come disguised as an uncomfortable decision. It may come disguised as an invitation that requires you to leave what is familiar. It may even come through something that initially scares you. Do not assume that discomfort means you are going the wrong way. Sometimes growth feels uncomfortable because your old identity is losing control. You have been asking for greater territory, but greater territory requires greater capacity. You have been asking for a higher level, but higher levels expose weaknesses that lower levels allowed you to hide. You have been asking to be trusted with more, but more demands greater discipline. This is why preparation is so important. The blessing is not only what comes into your hands, it is what the blessing requires from your character. If you receive more money but remain impulsive, the increase will not solve the problem. If you receive influence but remain insecure, attention will amplify the insecurity. If you receive love but refuse vulnerability, intimacy will become difficult. If you receive an opportunity but carry the fear of failure into it, you may abandon it before it has time to grow. So tomorrow, don't just ask, "What can I receive?" Ask, "What must I become?" That question separates wishful thinking from genuine preparation. You have already proven that you can endure. Now you must prove that you can steward. You have already demonstrated that you can survive the wilderness. Now you must demonstrate that you can walk through abundance without forgetting the wisdom you learned in scarcity. You have already learned how to fight. Now you must learn when not to fight. You have learned how to protect yourself. Now you must learn when it is safe to open your heart. You have learned how to work alone. Now you must learn how to recognize the right people and allow them to contribute. You have learned to distrust promises. Now you must learn to judge people by fruit rather than fear. This is maturity. And maturity is one of the greatest signs that a season has done its work. The old you needed constant confirmation. The new you can move with conviction. The old you chased every opportunity. The new you evaluates alignment. The old you feared being forgotten. The new you understands that invisibility can be protection. The old you needed everyone to clap. The new you can build quietly. The old you was desperate to arrive. The new you is prepared to arrive well. That distinction matters more than you know, because your next chapter should not simply be bigger. It should be healthier. It should be wiser. It should carry peace. It should have boundaries. It should have purpose. Otherwise, you are not leaving one cycle, you are decorating it. So hear this final truth deeply, chosen one. You are not behind. You are not disqualified because your timeline looks different. You are not less valuable because someone else reached a milestone before you. You are not forgotten because the answer took longer than expected. And you are not required to rush simply because the world is shouting that you should have arrived already. Your life is not a race against another person's calendar. There are things that could have destroyed you if they had arrived before you developed the strength to carry them. There are relationships you might have mistaken for blessings if you had not first learned the difference between love and dependency. There are opportunities you might have worshipped if rejection had not taught you that your identity cannot be built around access. There are levels you might have entered prematurely and then lost because your character had not caught up with your desire. Delay can be painful, but premature arrival can be dangerous. That is why you must stop looking at your waiting years as empty years. They were chapters, they were classrooms, they were mirrors. They exposed your fears. They revealed your strengths. They showed you who you were when nobody was watching. And now you have information you did not possess before. You know what drains you. You know what strengthens you. You know which voices deserve your attention. You know what compromises cost you. You know what peace feels like. You know what manipulation looks like. You know what happens when you abandon your own values to keep someone else happy. You know that not every open door is your door. You know that not every closed door is punishment. You know that sometimes losing something is the very thing that gives you your life back. And because you know these things now, you are not entering tomorrow empty-handed. You are carrying wisdom. You are carrying scars that no longer have to control you. You are carrying lessons that cost you tears. You are carrying discernment that was purchased in difficult seasons. You are carrying a deeper understanding of yourself. So when tomorrow arrives, do not wake up begging the past to return. Wake up expecting yourself to respond differently, walk differently, think differently, choose differently, speak differently, protect your peace differently, love differently, work differently. And when an opportunity appears, don't immediately ask whether it is too good to be true. Ask whether it aligns with the person you have become. When someone offers you access, don't ask only whether they want you. Ask whether their presence honors the person you are becoming. When a door opens, don't sprint through it because you are afraid it may close. Stand still long enough to discern. You have waited too long to become wise just to become reckless when the moment finally arrives. The end of delay should not make you desperate. It should make you deliberate. Let tomorrow find you ready. Let it find you with your mind clear, your heart lighter, your standards stronger, and your hands free from yesterday. Let it find you no longer begging for crumbs from tables where you were never meant to sit. Let it find you no longer trying to resurrect expired relationships. Let it find you no longer apologizing for becoming disciplined. Let it find you no longer afraid of the possibility that your life could actually become better. And if nothing changes externally the moment you wake up, do not conclude that nothing is happening. Your greatest transition may begin internally before anyone else can see it. The moment you stop calling yourself forgotten, something shifts. The moment you stop treating delay as destiny, something shifts. The moment you stop measuring your worth by speed, something shifts. The moment you decide that your future deserves more attention than your past, something shifts. That is where the new chapter begins. Not when everything becomes perfect. Not when everyone finally understands you. Not when every prayer receives an immediate answer. It begins when you decide that you will no longer live as though your best days are trapped behind you. The wilderness may have been long, but it was never your permanent address. The waiting may have exhausted you, but it does not own you. The closed doors may have disappointed you, but they did not destroy you. You are still here. You are still capable of becoming. You are still capable of loving. You are still capable of building. You are still capable of beginning again. And perhaps that is the deepest message of all fires. Tomorrow does not need a perfect version of you. It needs a willing one. So release the pressure to understand every detail. Release the obsession with timelines. Release the comparison. Release the fear that you missed your moment. Take what the waiting taught you, leave what the waiting damaged, and step forward. Because the season that taught you how to wait has done its work. Now learn how to move. Father, in the name of Jesus, I lift up every person who has received this message with a heart that has been tired from waiting. Lord, you know the years they cannot explain, the tears nobody saw, the prayers they whispered when they had no strength left to speak. You know every door that closed, every opportunity that disappeared, every disappointment that made them wonder whether they had been forgotten. Today, breathe fresh hope into their spirit. Break the grip of discouragement, fear, confusion, comparison, and hopelessness. Where delay has created doubt, restore faith. Where disappointment has created bitterness, restore tenderness. Where rejection has damaged their confidence, restore their identity. Give them discernment to recognize the doors that are truly meant for them, and courage to walk away from everything that no longer belongs in their future. Father, prepare them for what they have been praying for. Give them wisdom before increase, character before influence, discipline before abundance, and peace before elevation. Let them never rush into something simply because they are tired of waiting. Teach them to recognize your direction even when it does not look like what they expected. Let every season that wounded them become a source of wisdom rather than a prison. Let what was meant to break them become evidence of what they survived. And as they step toward tomorrow, remove the fear of beginning again. Give them strength to move forward without carrying yesterday on their back. In Jesus' name, let every chain of stagnation, intimidation, and self-doubt lose its hold. Let their vision become clear. Let their courage rise. Let their hearts become steady, and let them walk into their next chapter with wisdom, humility, confidence, and unwavering faith. Father, I also pray for every supporter who has sown into this work, shared this message, encouraged this channel, or simply believed that these words could help someone who was struggling in silence. Lord, you see their generosity even when nobody else does. You know the sacrifice behind every seed, every act of support, every time they help this message reach another person. Bless them according to your will, and let their kindness never return to them empty. Protect their homes, strengthen their families, guide their decisions, and give them wisdom concerning every opportunity before them. Where they have experienced prolonged waiting, bring clarity. Where they have experienced loss, bring restoration. Where they have been carrying burdens privately, send them strength for the journey. Open the right doors and give them discernment to recognize them. Close every door that would lead them away from peace, purpose, integrity, and your will. Let their generosity produce fruit beyond what they can immediately see. Not because they are purchasing a miracle, but because you honor a heart that gives with sincerity. Father, replenish what they have poured out. Let them never become empty while helping others. Give them fresh ideas, renewed strength, unexpected encouragement, and opportunities to use what you have placed inside them. Let this next chapter be marked by wisdom instead of confusion, purpose instead of distraction, peace instead of anxiety, and progress instead of endless circles. May they look back one day and understand why certain doors remained closed, why certain people had to leave, and why certain seasons lasted longer than they wanted. Let them discover that the waiting was not wasted. Let their story become proof that a difficult chapter does not have the authority to determine the ending. And when their moment of advancement comes, give them humility to remember where you brought them from, and wisdom to steward where you are taking them. May their lives become a testimony of restoration, resilience, and divine guidance. In the mighty name of Jesus, Amen.